handle the truth.
You're listening to Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit republicbroadcasting.org today, because you can handle the truth.
What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
Hello, everyone. My name is Stefan Verstappen, and I'm honored to be sitting in for the great, the legendary Michael Rivero. Mike will be back as soon as he can. He's working on his website. He has a problem with the PHP integrating with his web host, and I know that problem because I have the same problem with my website. So I'm going to have to go through what Mike does, which is reinstall the entire website and create another version of it. And yeah, that is a lot of work, and yeah, will easily take a week, maybe 2 weeks before Mike is back. I am broadcasting from the communist gulag, formerly known as Canada. Today is Friday, April 1st, and as Mike always says, thank goodness it's Friday, thank goodness it's Friday, thank goodness it's Friday. Sitting in with me is producer Mike, who will be here to help me if I should trip over my tongue, or if I have another one of those acid flashbacks and I start talking to the fairies again. Speaking of acid, LSD plays a role in why I became a truth teller. So I'm going to have to take you back to 1975. I'm in middle school. I think I was about 15 or so. And in those days, marijuana was illegal. And so to purchase marijuana, I would go downtown to the University of Toronto campus to what was then called Rochdale College, and I would buy marijuana from the college students. One time while I was there, one of the college students told me about a conspiracy theory. He said that the CIA was in Canada doing mind control experiments on housewives using massive doses of LSD. Well, I thought this was the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. I was just 15 at the time. I wasn't really into conspiracy theories. I hadn't really, we didn't know about conspiracies in those days. There was no internet, and those kind of books were not available in the library. You'd have to order them, through the mail order system, and you'd have to find out about them through some sort of, newspaper, underground newspaper. So we didn't know anything about conspiracy theories. So when I heard that the CIA was in Canada experimenting on housewives using LSD for mind control experiments, I thought this was the most ridiculous thing I ever heard, and I paid it no attention. Well, fast forward 10 years. It's now 1984, 1983, and a story comes out in the mainstream media. It was a television program called W5, which was the Canadian equivalent to 60 Minutes. So it was, a reputable. In those days, we thought these news sources were reputable. Of course, we know better now. But they came out with a story about a Dr. Ewan Cameron. Ewan Cameron was a psychiatrist at the prestigious medical university, McGill University, in Montreal. And it turned out that he was conducting illegal medical experiments on housewives. So what happened was, if a woman, and typically these were just middle-class housewives, if they went to their doctor complaining of, say, depression or anxiety or fatigue, that doctor would recommend her to the university medical clinic at McGill. And there she would come into the clutches of Ewan Cameron. What he did to these women was inhuman. He put them into a drug-induced coma for up to 3 months at a time. Then he subjected them to high voltage electrovolt treatments 3 times a day that literally fried their brains. Then he injected them with high doses of LSD. Now, back in the 70s, I took my fair share of LSD. And I can tell you, if I was given an overdose of this chemical, you would lose your mind. It is a powerful drug. In small quantities, it's interesting, but if you were to be overdosed on this stuff, you would literally be in hell. You would lose your mind, and I can't think of a more terrifying experience these women must have gone through. And then, after that, he would clamp a helmet to their heads, and this helmet would repeat thousands and thousands of times a recording in what Ewan Cameron called psychic driving. Recordings such as "Your mother hates you" would be played 50,000 times a day while these women were in a coma on LSD being subjected to electroshock therapy. And all of this was with the knowledge and consent of the Canadian government, of the Psychiatric Association, of the medical school. They all knew about it. This kind of treatment, what these women went through, is worse than something you would see in a horror movie. And it was all true. So after that came out, after that story came out, I never automatically dismissed any conspiracy theory. And the reason I say this to you is because myself and many other people have been trying to warn our fellow citizens, warn our families and friends, as the expression goes, wake them up to what is happening now and the dangers we are facing. And the usual response from these people are, well, the government would never do something that evil. Well, yes, they would. They would do something that evil. They did do something that evil. And they've been committing crimes against humanity on the population of all our countries for at least 50 years and even longer when you go back through the historical records to find out what our governments did to us. They are perfectly capable of inhuman crimes against their own citizens. And the story of this conspiracy theory, which I thought was so outrageous it couldn't possibly be true, it was true. The other thing I learned from this is that there is a force, there is a power behind the governments that is united in doing evil, so that the Canadian government is in cahoots with the American government, with the CIA, and they are in cahoots with the Medical Association. You see, Ewan Cameron was never held accountable for his crimes. He published his experiments in the medical journals of his day. Now, this was in the 50s and 60s. These were the good old days. This was going on behind the scenes during Harriet and Ozzy and Leave It to Beaver and Andy Griffin's show. You know, the middle class, virtuous, honest, hard-working country that we were in those days. We thought things were good. We thought the government was not capable of doing some of this, any of this, and yet they were doing it. And he had published his experiments in the local medical journals. And not only did no one confront him about the immoral nature of his experiments, he was voted to be president of the Canadian American Psychiatric Foundation. He was rewarded for his evil. So, well, since then, I don't trust government. I don't trust that there is a separation between the evil the American government does and the evil that the supposedly good Canadian government does, because they are all controlled by a third force, a third influence, an influence of absolute evil. I also don't trust the medical profession. If all these medical doctors could read about these experiments, the absolute inhuman horror that this guy committed on innocent housewives, and they never objected, they never confronted him, and instead they awarded him, they voted him to be the president of their association. Well, I'm sorry, I have no respect for the medical profession anymore. And as we have seen these last 2 years, we cannot trust the medical profession. I don't trust them, and neither should you. And so that is how I came to belong to the truth movement. And since then, if I hear a conspiracy theory, no matter how outrageous or how unlikely, I will research it. I will look into it. I'm not going to dismiss it saying, oh, no, the government wouldn't do that. That's too evil. No, there is no evil great enough that the government would not commit it against you. And so that's how I became a truth teller. Now, to talk a little bit about myself, and those of you who know me, and most of the listeners out there, you guys don't know me, I know. I've never been on whatreallyhappened.com. I've been a fan of Mike for many years. I've been listening into his radio shows religiously for at least 20 years. But you probably have never heard of me before. I do a lot of guest appearances on other podcasts. I've been on the Jeff Wrench show and Caravan to Midnight and those types of shows. But I've never been a host either, so this is a little bit difficult for me to do. I'm just winging it, so to speak. But I'd like to tell you about the road that led me here today. And it started off when I was 12 years old. You see, I am now 65. I was born in 1957. I was a child, or I was a kid, in the 1960s, and I was a teenager in the 1970s. And in the 60s and 70s, we were inundated with fear porn. We were constantly reminded that we were on the verge of a nuclear apocalypse. There were movies and the Twilight Zone and numerous made-for-TV movies, and the theory was that at any moment we could see a nuclear war. I was about 5 years old when the Cuban Missile Crisis occurred, and that was something that all the neighbors in my neighborhood talked about for years. As a matter of fact, when my parents bought the first house in a new subdivision, you were given options. Do you want a garage, a second car garage? Do you want a porch? Or do you want a fallout shelter? That's how prominent it was in the common psyche of the time that you could buy a new house and have a fallout shelter underneath the backyard, because we thought we were going to go into the Third World War. and it was going to be a nuclear catastrophe. So when I was 12, I decided to become a survivalist and a prepper. So the first thing I did was I joined the Outward Bound group. Now, it's the Outward Bound group, it's not very popular anymore. I know they still run courses or they still run programs, but it's hard to find them, and not very many people are aware of their existence. But it was a marvelous program. It's what made me who I am today. Because what they did was, 3 times a year for a week, they would take you up north here in Canada. When you want to go to the wilderness, you go up north to a Boy Scout camp, and there they taught you numerous wilderness and survival skills. They taught you how to build shelters, how to make a fire. They taught you archery, how to shoot a rifle, how to rappel down a cliff, how to explore a cave, how to canoe and perform a canoe over canoe rescue, how to hike, how to camp. And once a week or once a month, they would take you on a day trip to one of the local conservation areas. And again, they taught you wilderness skills such as orienteering and tracking. And I did that for 3 years. It was marvelous. And, I've always been an advocate of that kind of a program. Get the kids outside, get them in the woods, teach them some real wilderness survival skills. I learned so much that by the time I was 15, I was soloing into the woods by myself, going on, week-long canoe trips into Algonquin Park. And a few years later, I became an instructor for the Toronto Boys Home for their Outward Bound program. So I taught the program for a number of years. I learned how to survive in the woods. The next thing I did was I became interested in martial arts. I started again at the age of 12. I took judo at first, and then a little bit of karate, and then I went to taekwondo, and then I went down to Chinatown in Toronto, and I studied at kung fu clubs in Chinatown. And then after 5 years of doing that, I moved to China to study kung fu in Hong Kong and in Taiwan and in Thailand and in mainland China and in Korea. I spent 4 years in the Far East learning martial arts. And then when I came back, I taught martial arts, and I have been teaching martial arts ever since. So that's 40 years. The next thing I delved into was there is a tradition in martial arts that kung fu masters were also medical doctors. I know it sounds a little bit strange, It sounds like they're opposites of the same pole. On the one hand, you're learning how to inflict damage on the human body, and on the other hand, you're trying to heal people. But it's actually a very ancient tradition in China. Both of my kung fu masters, Master Chan Hon Chung in Hong Kong and Master Tsai Chen Ru in Taipei, were both Chinese medical doctors. And so I tried to learn as much as I could from them. But I also joined St. John Ambulance, and I became an instructor for St. John Ambulance. Now, St. John Ambulance is the Canadian or British Commonwealth equivalent to the Red Cross. And it was great teaching for them, because not only did I hone my skills in, and we'll be right back. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Sorry about that. Like I said, it's my first time doing this, and so I'm liable to trip up a few times. Anyways, picking up where we left off, and so I became a survivalist. I learned emergency medical skills, always a good thing to have. especially if you're a prepper and a survivalist. And I always advise everyone to take a first aid course. I worked for St. John Ambulance and the Red Cross. I also participated in a number of disaster simulation drills. You might have seen these in the local newspaper where they close down the, say, downtown section of your small town, and we have a bunch of volunteers go out there and pretend that they are injured. We sprinkle a lot of fake blood around, and we do a lot of makeup to replicate injuries and burns, and then we coordinate with the fire department and the ambulance service and the voluntary first aid services people to go into the situation, do triage, treat the injuries, and reduce the hazards within the environment. I won a couple of awards for that, one from St. John Ambulance and one from the mayor for my participation in handling, disaster simulation drills. And so I'm prepared to handle, whatever is coming down the pipe. I've got those kind of skills. Also, the martial arts is a very good skill to have, because if we are looking at a SHTF situation and a complete breakdown of law and order, knowing how to defend yourself is a useful skill. So those are all useful skills, and not only did I learn those skills, I taught those skills for many, many years. I was just listening to Roger's show from yesterday afternoon, and I couldn't agree with Roger more. Not Roger Moore. I could not agree more with Roger when he says that you need to learn, but don't learn unless you're willing to teach. And so that is what I've been trying to do for the last 40 years, is teach these skills so that we can all better survive what is coming. So this brings me to my first book, The 36 Strategies of Ancient China, which is a book on military strategies and tactics. It's in the same category as the infamous book by Sun Tzu, or Sun Tzu, The Art of War. But it's a little bit more ruthless than The Art of War. These are stories taken from throughout the last 3,000 years of history of various military strategies and tactics that have been used in the past. The reason I wrote this book is because I want to teach people how to be cunning. One thing I've learned is that the people that rule this world are ruthless, vicious, and extremely cunning. And if you cannot understand what ruthless and cunning is, you will be a victim. You need to understand how these people operate. It's like Sun Tzu says in his book, The Art of War. Number one rule for the general is know your enemy. And our enemy are the people, the rulers, the invisible hand that run things. And these people are ruthless and cunning and vicious. And if you don't understand that, you are at a distinct disadvantage. Now, in order to write this book, I researched 3,000 years worth of military history, 3,000 years worth of military history, battles, strategies, tactics, what, emperors and shoguns and kings, how they behaved. And when you do that kind of research, two things came through to me. Number one is that history is cyclical. Now, Mark Twain said that history does not repeat itself, but rather it rhymes. And Mark Twain, one of my favorite writers, is absolutely correct in that. There is a cycle to history. When you read enough of it and you see the same patterns repeat over and over and over again, then you can see that, there is some truth to that saying. Now, years earlier, when I was still living in Taipei, I read a book that I wouldn't normally read, but In those days, any book in English we read because there was very few English books available to us in Taiwan, and of course there was no English TV show, so we weren't spending any time in front of the the boob tube. And one book I read was
What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Hi, and welcome back, everybody. So just to continue quickly, let me run through this. I read a book about historical cycles written by an Indian philosopher called P. Sarkar, I believe his name is. And it intrigued me because when I was a teenager, I read the book Foundation Trilogy by Isaac Asimov, and the basic premise of that book was that in a future society, a historian was able to crack the code, so to speak, of historical cycles, and using this code, he could predict the future. Oh, yeah, I wanted to know about that. I'd love to be able to predict the future. And by studying history, to a certain degree, you can predict the future. So after my first book, I wrote an essay called Historical Cycles, Are We Doomed to Repeat the Past? And that essay was published in Gerald Salente's The Trends Journal. And it was even covered on Alex Jones' InfoWars in one of their episodes. And I made a video. You can go to YouTube, search for Historical Cycles, Are We Doomed to Repeat the Past? And that explains clearly and easily the four-stage cycle of civilization, the rise, the maturity, the corruption, and then the final collapse into chaos that all civilizations go through. So I knew what was coming. I could predict it. And I don't know why. I've been cursed with an altruism where I really feel that I need to try and help the world. I mean, it's rather egotistical to think I could do anything to make the world a better place, but I have always sought to do so. Whether I succeed or whether I fail, that doesn't matter, because I think it is the duty of all of us to try to make the world a better place. Leave it better than you found it is my motto for that. And so I'm trying to now devise ways that I can save and help and improve the lives of my fellow man. So the next book I wrote was the book, The Art of Urban Survival. Now, I said there were two things I learned researching all this history, all this military history. One is how ruthless and cunning these people are. But the second thing I learned is there are certain personality types. And this brought me into the research and study of psychopaths. And the first chapter of my book, The Art of Urban Survival, is called Defense Against the Psychopath. And I made a 45-minute documentary on that chapter. And again, if you search on YouTube for Defense Against the Psychopath, you will find it. It's by far, yes, I would like calls. It is by far my most popular video. I think, I haven't checked it in about a year, but last time I checked it, it was well over 500,000 views. And so the first chapter of my book, The Art of Urban Survival, is about psychopath, defense against the psychopath. Now, the reason for that is, if you don't understand the psychology of these creatures, these entities, you won't understand what's happening to us now or why it's happening. Again, a lot of the times when I'm trying to wake people up, they would say, well, no, the government can't do anything that evil, or people aren't that evil. No, they are that evil. They're called psychopaths. They live to see people suffer. They live to do evil. That's what they are. Now, here's the scary thing about psychopaths, is that every society eventually will become dominated by psychopaths. Every hierarchical organization, this is where the pyramid comes in. A pyramid is a hierarchical structure where the person at the top gets to control millions at the bottom. And these structures attract psychopaths. And because psychopaths are so ruthless and so cunning, they will always find their way to the top positions of all of these organizations. So after 50 to 100 years, your entire government will be infiltrated by solely psychopaths. All your presidents, all your mayors, all your governors, all your police chiefs, they're all psychopaths. They're evil people that like to do evil. If you don't understand that, you'll wonder, oh, why are they doing this? How could they do something like... No, you have to understand what they're all about. And they will eventually control everything. They'll control the medical industry. They'll control the educational industry. They'll control the central banks. They'll control large corporations, because they always get in, because they will weed out any honorable, virtuous candidates for those positions, because they're that ruthless. They're that cunning. So I've done, hundreds of interviews talking about psychopaths, warning people, trying to educate them. This is what we are dealing with. We're dealing with psychopaths. Now, the rest of my book, The Art of Urban Survival, is a prophecy. Based on what I learned about historical cycles, I structured the book to deal with all the things we will eventually deal with during this fourth stage of our society, the collapse stage of our civilization. And this is what you're going to deal with. And that's why I led with the psychopath, the chapter on psychopaths, because they're everywhere now. The next thing I covered is, in the book, crime and violence. That's what happens when civilizations begin to deteriorate. You will see a sharp increase in crime and violence. So the second chapter is all about how to prevent crime, how to protect yourself, how to be safe, and even some defense techniques, and even some improvised weapon techniques, and what to do if you're being stalked or kidnapped or being assaulted or in a car accident. All these things, all these ways of protecting yourself from crime is in the second chapter. And look around us. We see the crime statistics going through the roof. Through the roof. After that, the book deals with natural disasters. Now, for some reason, and it may be spiritual or godlike, but during the collapse phase of society, there is always an increase in natural disasters. So look around. Look at what we see now. We see the droughts. Look at Australia is going through unprecedented amounts of flooding. We will also see, we saw last year, flooding and droughts and tornadoes and hurricanes. And this is what happens during the collapse phase of society. So that chapter deals with how to be prepared for it, how to make a bug-out kit, how to, the tools and equipment and the medical kits you would need to have handy. And again, I've done numerous videos and numerous talks on about getting prepared. It's essential. You need to be prepared. It's going down. And even if you don't believe that it's going to be a complete collapse, you still need to be prepared for these natural disasters. And so if you're prepared for a natural disaster, you'll be prepared for a man-made disaster, which is the third chapter, man-made disasters. And in this chapter I talk about blackouts, riots, chemical attack, biological attack, nuclear attack, martial law, and war. And again, have my predictions come true? Do we see that around us now? Do we see the riots? Do we see martial law? We've certainly seen it here in Canada. Do we see biological attacks? Of course we do. This is what happens during the collapse phase of society. And so that was my book, The Art of Urban Survival. The book I wrote after that is The Master's Guide to the Way of the Warrior. Again, I put this book out there because I'm trying to help people. What I realized with my first book is that I can give you all the information. How to prevent crime, how to be safe, how to be street smart. Very important to be street smart. How to prepare for natural disasters, and what to do in cases of martial law or pandemics or biological disasters. But there's a problem. We don't have enough real men. You see, we have been subjected to at least 50 years worth of programming to emasculate men. You've heard the term toxic masculinity. Well, that's to shame men for being men. And unless you become a warrior, and that is the point of this book, it's trying to teach you, I'm trying to teach you, how to become a warrior. And it's not just about fighting. It's not just about, hand-to-hand combat. Yes, you need to learn hand-to-hand combat. You also need to learn how to handle a firearm. I urge everyone to get training in firearms and hand-to-hand combat. But it's more the philosophy and the attitude, the state of mind you need to survive what's coming. It's going to be ugly, people. It's going to be really ugly. And unless you are strong, spiritually strong, emotionally strong, and physically strong, you will be a victim, and your chances of survival will drop. And so that was the point of my book, The Master's Guide to the Way of the Warrior. It goes into the philosophy of the warrior way. I talk about shamanism. I talk about stoicism, there's numerous techniques in exercise, how to overcome fear, how to deal with pain, how to stay strong in the face of overwhelming danger, and how to protect others and yourself. These are the traditional values of a warrior, and we need to be warriors. And that was the point of my book, The Master's Guide to the Way of the Warrior. And so it looks like we're ready for calls. So that is the road that has led me here. So where are we? Where are we? Where we are now, folks. And I don't like fear porn. I always try to stay positive. And ultimately what I'm trying to teach you is positive, because if you follow some of my advice, you will survive. You will survive where most will fail. But the thing is, we are at a point in history now, a crucial turning point in history. I don't think there has ever been a situation that we face today has ever occurred in the past. We are, to put it bluntly, in a war against pure evil. You have to take a side now, folks. There is no sitting on the sidelines. You either do something to fight for virtue and honor and goodness and freedom, or you're on the side of the enemy. You can't just say, oh, I wash my hands of this. I'm going to sit back and watch it. If you're sitting back and watching it, you're on the side of evil. I'm just saying it the way it is. You have got to do something. Everybody listening has to get on board, because if we lose this battle against the evil forces, against the psychopaths, and against whatever supernatural, interdimensional, intergalactic forces that are behind this, and my mind is not made up on any of those, but there is something truly unusually evil about what's going on right now. And if we lose this war, we are looking at 1,000-year dark age. We are looking at endless misery and suffering and tyranny and slavery. You know, I sit and I do my work at my desk, and I look out my window, and I can see, the surrounding neighborhood. And every morning at 10 minutes to 9 o'clock, all the parents are taking their children to school, to the elementary school nearby. And I watch those kids. I don't have children myself, but I love kids. I've always been really good with kids. I used to teach kids. And they're so cute, and they're so innocent. And it hurts me to think what kind of lives they are going to be living. Their lives are already over. They will not experience what I experienced as a child. They will only experience tyranny and cruelty. And we can't let that happen. I mean, they're not my kids, but look, we're here for a purpose, people. And that purpose is not to watch Netflix and eat McDonald's. That's not our purpose on this planet. Our purpose on this planet is to grow our souls. And the way we grow a soul is by virtue and honor. And we'll be right back, and we'll take your calls when we come back. And welcome back, everybody. Thank you very much for continuing to listen in. We've got about 5 minutes before the top of the hour, and when we come back, I'll be taking your calls, which is something I'm more comfortable with. So if you have a question for me, and on anything that I've discussed today or current events, you can call in at 512-248-8252. So the last thing I want to talk about before we leave for the break and come back with the phone call, with the questions and the callers, is that we're losing this war, folks. I am racking my brains on how we can fight these people. And as you know, or as I mentioned, I'm up here in Canada. I was out on the side of the road by the highway, waving and welcoming the Freedom Convoy, the trucker convoy that went to Ottawa. And I can tell you the people that were out there, now I live in a small town, mostly Mennonites and some Amish, and these were good people. They were husbands and wives and grandparents and children and toddlers. And then to hear the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, turn around and call us all Nazis and racists. And then he unleashed the goons, the jackboots, and they clamped down on the protesters. And then a further insult is to confiscate and close down their bank accounts. This is the true face of the people we are dealing with. Look what they did. These were honest to God, salt of the earth, middle class, blue collar farmers and families that just wanted to be left alone. And the psychopath in chief, Justin Trudeau, came down on them like a bunch of bricks. And did anything change? Did they withdraw the mandates? Did they even talk to the truckers? No, they did none of that. And that tells you these people are not going to stop. You are going to get the chip. You are going to lose your cash. You're going to lose your house and your car, and they're going to take your children. They are not going to stop. And what are you going to do about it? Protest? It doesn't work. Sign petitions? It doesn't work. Vote them out of office? We've seen how well that worked at the last election. None of these things work. And if anybody's thinking that we're going to go get our firearms and start shooting at them, that's the surest way to get killed. That's not going to work. So we are losing this war. The only thing I can say, the only thing I can tell you, the only advice I have is to save yourself and your community. And that means you got to prep. You got to get ready. You need 6 months to a year's supply of food. They already told you they're going to starve you. You need to get medical equipment, stockpile your medicines. And because we already know the hospitals aren't going to be available. They're already a disaster. Get ready, folks. Get prepped. Store food, water, and medicines. And I'm ready to take your questions when we come back.
Welcome to the Michael Rivero What Really Happened radio program.
And welcome back, everybody. As I mentioned at the start of the show, I am the guest host for this episode of the What Really Happened show. And my name is Stefan Verstappen. And we're ready to take some callers. And I believe the first caller we have is Chris in California.
Hi, Stefan. Excuse me. It's so great to hear you. I'm glad you're guest hosting. I first came across you by listening to your thing on rents, how it will go down, Agenda 2030.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just fascinating.
Thank you,
I try
Chris.
to get people around me who want to know what we're kind of facing to listen to it. I don't know if they do or not, but that was just an amazing thing you did there.
Thank you, Chris.
I'm amazed at how similar our backgrounds are. I'm a few years older than you, and I don't live in Canada. I've always lived in Southern California, but I didn't have the experience in the woods like you did. Down here, you cut your teeth out in the ocean. I was a surfer from basically the day I was born. And surfing sounds like it's fun, and it normally is, and everything else. But when you go out on big days, when it becomes life-threatening, you learn some things about yourself and about your physical capabilities. Then I began my martial arts training in February of 1974, Shotokan Karate, with experts down here in the Southern California area. Did that on and off, the whole time. Still doing it a little bit. I've got a lot of injuries. And so I understand, where you're coming from there. I eventually got injured. I blew out to L4, L5, so I couldn't do the hard martial arts. So I transitioned into Chinese internal martial arts. And like you said, my teacher, who was an American guy, but he had lived and trained in China. He was a master of Bagua, Xingyi, Tai Chi Chuan, Yang style, and a couple of others. He ended up teaching me the Tai Chi form, which is just fascinating. I love it. And I also have done a lot of research on psychopaths. I know who's running this world and what they're all about.
Yes.
One question I have for you, I have my own martial arts library here also, like you do. A book that I didn't hear you mention. You have a book of 5 Rings by Miyamoto Musashi.
I've read it 6 times.
Very good. Very good. Very good strategy. And by the way, your books sound really fascinating, and I'm going to buy them and read them. Where can I get them?
Well, you can get them on Amazon. I know Amazon is one of the great evils in the world, but um,
Yeah.
but what's the alternative? I think Barnes and Noble has my books, and also Lulu has my books, but Amazon is, the number one bookseller in the world. If you want to sell any books, you got to go on Amazon. I justify it by saying using a guerrilla strategy, which is you forage off your enemy. So if Amazon is willing to distribute my anti-government, anti-authoritarian books, so be it. Because it's better that those books get into the hands of people than me make a pointless statement of not using Amazon. So you can go to Amazon. All my books are on Amazon. The 36 Strategies, The Art of Urban Survival, and The Master's Guide to the Way of the Warrior. And I know you will like my book, The Way of the Warrior, because it's, there is so much bullshit in martial arts. It's almost right? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
It's almost embarrassing for me to say I'm a martial arts instructor, because I think, well, people are going to associate me with all these frauds and con artists. But the fact of the matter is, martial arts, and I've always admired the Shotokan style. People write me all the time, well, what style should I learn? What? I always say, well, find the best school you can, the best instructor. It's the instructor. Is he honorable? Is he knowledgeable? Is he kind and gentle with his students? You've seen this, the kind of Cobra Kai clubs like I've seen where you get these macho guys running around beating up on their students. No, you need a good instructor. But in terms of styles, I like Shotokan. It's clean, it's simple. I'm a big fan of Gichin Funakoshi. I read his book. He is a true warrior, and if that's an example to follow, I'd say follow him. So, but what I've done in my book, the thing is, there are wonderful benefits to training in martial arts. Not just the fighting, not just the self-defense, the mental discipline, the confidence, the strength, the health, the philosophy. All of these are really beneficial and provide you with a lot of strength and courage needed to get through this world, get through this life, because what the world is like. And so I commend you on taking Shotokan. I'm a big fan of it, and I'm sure you'll like my book, because what I've done is I've stripped it of all the bullshit. When I was in China, in Taiwan, my teacher, Tsai Chen-Ru, he used to do all these kung fu tricks, right? Like hammer a nail through a board with the back of his fist, and bend the spears in his throat, right? Or lay on a bed of nails and have concrete blocks smashed on his chest with a sledgehammer. And he did all these tricks, right? But he showed me how they work. They're tricks. They're scams. They're nothing more than magic tricks, really, is what they are. And, well, listen, that's a tradition in the kung fu schools. What Master Tsai would do once a year, he would go into the local park with all the students. They would beat the drums. We would have the lion dance. We'd get a big crowd together, and then he would do all this strongman techniques, and and then they would sell the Chinese medicine, the dietacho and Zonggu Shui, and he would sell the medicine, and he would sell this. Okay, good. It's in good fun, really, but it's not real. And I object to all the bullshit in martial arts, because what it does is cover up the real benefits of martial arts training. And I think you know what I'm talking about, Chris.
Oh, yeah, it helped me tremendously. I'm basically retired now. It helped me out a tremendous business career, and I've got good relationships with people and my wife and so on. By the way, there's many kinds of Shotokan. There's a bunch of fake ones. My lineage is through Gichin Funakoshi. As you probably know,
Yes.
he was born in Okinawa, and I think it was 1868.
Yeah.
that he was invited to come to Japan in 1922, I believe, to start teaching karate, which he did in the universities. And one of his latest and greatest students was Tsutomu Oshima, who was my instructor.
Wow.
He used to live in Los Angeles. Now he's in like Santa Barbara. Has a dojo up there. He is retired, by the way. He retired a couple of years ago at the age of 88.
Wow.
I believe he's 90, or he was born in 30.
Yeah.
So he's coming up on 92. And anyway, he was my main instructor. The dojo I belonged to when I started living in Long Beach was Paramount Dojo, and one of Mr. Oshima's most talented, badass students was Don Dupree. He was my instructor. And when you become brown belt, you can go to brown belt practice every Sunday with Mr. Oshima, and then after that was black belt practice. So we did that, and so that is my lineage. And is different. That there's other kinds of kind of fake Shotokans, you know, and I know exactly what you mean about a lot of the BS in martial arts and stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm not a big fan of Amazon like you either, but I don't buy very much, so I don't feel guilty at all about buying your books through them.
Well, that's great, Chris. Thank you very much. And you have a sterling lineage. I can't say how much I admire.
I do. It's the best.
Yeah.
In terms of Shotokan, it's the best.
Yeah.
You know, and my Chinese, you know, I took, after I blew my back out in 1994, basically I sat on a pillow and I meditated for about 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
I didn't know if I'd even be able to walk again. Then I started going to the bookstore and developing my my martial arts library.
Yes.
I've got books of all kinds of martial arts.
Yeah.
And I became fascinated with learning about internal martial arts. And if you read, I guess they call them the classics.
Yes.
You know, the old Chinese masters say that if you practice a hard martial arts like karate, you will eventually wreck your body.
Yes.
And I'm living proof of that. And a lot of my instructors and seniors and juniors are living proof also. So what I finally did, I found, there's a saying that when you're ready for a teacher, you will find the teacher.
Yes, the teacher.
So I found a teacher in Costa Mesa, and I told him, you know, here's what I've done, and here's my injuries, and basically what I want to do is learn about internal power, because as you get older, obviously your physical strength diminishes.
Yes.
So I spent 6 years taking private lessons with him once a week. And at first we didn't know where we were going, but ultimately he decided that the best thing to do would be to teach me the Yang-style Tai Chi Chuan form.
Yeah, 24 movements.
Yeah, just fascinating stuff.
Yeah. No, I always recommend that to my students as well. When I was a teacher, I knew all this because of my experience with St. John Ambulance, and because I did a lot of research on anatomy and, on health.
Yeah.
And so I always warned my students against overtraining. For example, I'm not a big fan of punching bricks and punching pine boards.
Right.
You know, I tell them,
we don't do that.
Don't do that. What do you think it's going to do? You get a little bit of a Listen, I did it for a while too. I had the calluses on the knuckles. You know, you're so you're so badass because you got the big callus on your knuckle. And but how does that benefit you in any way? What instead, what it does is it deteriorates the cartilage, and by the time you're 40, you're going to have arthritis in your hands. Now, I play guitar, and now I'm 65. I can still play guitar because I didn't punch a brick wall 50 times a day. And the same thing with the ballistics.
You know what Mr. Oshima told us? Like you've heard about people, martial arts doing a technique with open fingers and like punching him into a bag of beans or something.
Yeah.
And there's other kinds of really severe training, obviously. And basically what Mr. Oshima said is, number one, if you're doing that with your hands, he says there's very important nerve endings in your fingers, and they attach to your vital organs.
Yes.
For example, the tip of your ring finger might be directly connected to your liver. The tip of your little finger might be connected to your spleen.
Yes.
So if you do these things, not only can you wreck your hands, but you can do internal damage to your organs.
Yes, and that's in keeping with traditional Chinese medicine, and I would imagine traditional Japanese medicine as well. Everything is connected.
Yeah. My internal martial arts teacher, by the way, he was also a master in Chinese medicine and acupuncture.
There you go.
And so, yeah, I mean, he was an American, but he was really, really good, and he had lived in China.
Yeah.
And he has many teachers over there.
Yeah. Well, to this day, I can still kick over my head just about every kick, crescent kick, side kick, roundhouse, and all that. Whereas almost all the guys that I trained with, and I warned them because I warned them against the ballistic stretches, I warned them against forcing the stretch. They all have double hip replacements. Double hip replacements.
Yeah.
They're in their 50s. Their hips are shot. And they've come back to me and they said, you know what, you were right. I said, right about what? He says, my doctor told me that I wouldn't be getting a hip replacement if I hadn't abused my body. And you warned me 25 years ago not to do those exercises, and I didn't listen to you. Yeah. And now I got to get a double hip replacement, and they can, you know, they're not going to kick over their head anymore. Listen, you don't have to,
exactly.
But what I prescribed for those guys now is Tai Chi. I studied Xingyi as well as you did, but I don't remember too much of it. I learned the kata and then I forgot it. Then I still practice Bagua.
Good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I still practice my Bagua form.
Fascinating art.
And I practice my Tai Chi Yang
I'm,
style.
Like you're talking about, I have arthritis in both of my hands.
Yes.
I can't even really make a fist anymore.
Yes.
Believe it or not, I found another martial art on YouTube videos. It's an Indonesian martial art called Silat, S-I-L-A-T.
Yes, I'm familiar with it.
There's this one instructor who is, I think he's back east someplace here in America. It is like 4 or 5 minute videos. And it's basically just open-handed fighting, you know.
Sure.
Believe it or not, what he does demonstrations where you can actually hit harder with an open hand, kind of a slap, than you can with a fist. So that's kind of my martial arts these days, because I can't make a fist.
Yeah. No, same thing with all the guys I trained with 30 years ago. Same thing, Chris. They got arthritis in their fingers. They can't make a fist. And listen, the fist is overrated anyways. I tell people, listen, punching with the fist, you know, the wrist absorbs a lot of the energy. But when you strike with a heel palm, all the energy goes into your opponent. It's much more effective. But yes, Tai Chi and Xingyi and Bagua. But Tai Chi, I teach it. I teach the same style that you're learning, Yang style. And I learned it years ago knowing that someday I would get old. And I can't do the hard styles. I can't do the spinning backward side kick anymore. I could do it a little bit, but it takes a lot out of me, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But
well,
Tai
listen,
Chi...
I'll let you get going. You know, your show is just fascinating. I love the other things you've done, and I can't wait to buy your books. And I'm just so glad, you know, I talked to Michael Rivero yesterday. I talked to him and his wife about her injury, and we won't get into that, but thank God she's okay.
Yeah,
and I
Claire
guess Mike is
great.
going to be gone doing some work on his website or something, so it's nice to hear these guests host, and I think you're the first or the second, and you're fantastic. I really love it.
Oh, Chris, thank you very much for calling in. I really appreciate it. You take care now.
Okay. You too. Have a good day. Have a great weekend.
You too, Chris. Bye-bye. Our next caller, I believe, is John from Connecticut. John, are you there?
Yeah, hey, Stefan. This is John in Connecticut. I'm a huge fan. It's an honor to talk to you. We're actually friends on Facebook. That's how I found out, you were guest hosting the show today.
Oh, okay.
And, and I call you on Jeff Rent's show every time. Particularly loved your work with the How It Will Go Down.
Yeah.
I'm
working on another one. How It Should Go Down. But it's going to be really violent and bloody.
Yeah, we're in real bad times, man. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, I'm here in Connecticut, the communist state here.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how it is in Canada in your local area, but I mean, you hit the nail on the head in the last segment. We're up against psychopaths, guys like Bill Gates. I mean, and combine that with the fact that most people do not want to wake up. They don't understand that basically life is over. I mean, life as we knew it. They want everyone basically off the planet so they can have like their life extension technology and whatnot, or whatever their agenda is.
Yeah, and they got their robots.
And, I mean, for the past 2 years since March 2020, the pandemic kind of caught me off guard. But as soon as I saw Gates on there talking about how we all need to be vaccinated, I knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I've been having the biggest problem especially with friends and family, trying to wake them up.
I know.
They're not, they don't get it.
I know that's a big problem. That's one of the most common problems I hear people talk to me about. Because, for example, I do consultations if you need help in getting prepped. You need a plan on how to get ready for what's coming. I offer consultations. You have to go to my website, chinastrategies.com, and you can book a 2-hour session with me, and I'll go over everything and get you up and started if you're not, and get you along your way if you are. But the common complaint I get from all of my clients is, and it's one of the first questions I ask people when I do these.
You might want to hold on to that, Stefan. We're going to break.
Okay, John, hang in there. We'll be right back, okay? And we're back, everybody. We're taking calls, and if you have a question for me, call in at 512-248-8252. And we're continuing our call with John from Connecticut. John, go ahead.
Yeah, stuff. I actually do have your books. I did buy them from Amazon. They're very good. Especially the ones on breathing and the horse stance training and all that. I definitely enjoyed that, and
excellent.
Definitely recommend it.
Thank you very much, John. I appreciate that.
But a couple questions, like prepping questions.
Sure.
Number one, like what foods? Because we're getting down to the wire here.
Yes.
Like what foods would you recommend, like stockpiling from the store? I have some freeze-dried food that I've gotten from Costco, and I've actually started 2 years ago, here and there. But I'd like to get a little more. And I try to get the healthiest stuff I can find, and without spending a fortune. But what would you recommend?
Well, believe it or not, while I'm sitting here talking to you, I am putting flour into Mylar bags with desiccant powder and freezing it for long-term storage. I'm constantly adding to my food stocks because I think I've got about, I got to do an assessment, but I think I got at least 6-8 months worth of food, but that might not be enough, because when you read, I've read some blogs about people that lived in Venezuela in the last few years, and they said that, there were preppers in Venezuela that saw the same thing happening there, which is now happening to us. And they had a year's supply of food. What went on in Venezuela lasted 3 years. So after 1 year, even the preppers, the people that had prepared, now they were starving, and now they were looking at their cats and dogs as a potential source of protein. This is how terrible it will get. Listen, we are under for all intents and purposes, a communist system, and the communists always starve their populations. So what I do is I continually add to it. First of all, I stock up on the staples, what I call the staples, and that is pasta. It lasts forever, and it will fill your belly. And rice. I just bought another 50 pounds worth of rice. I got to put them in Mylar bags later today. And I bought an extra 50 pounds of flour, which I'm actually putting in Mylar bags as we speak. I'm always multitasking here. So stock up on your staples: pasta, flour, rice, beans. But I also buy a lot of canned food. I'm not a big fan of the 25-year shelf life freeze dried foods. I looked at what's in them, and it's rice-a-roni and Kraft dinner. That's mostly what it is.
It's true. Yeah, and they have a lot of MSG in them, too, I noticed. Like, there's a lot of chemicals. And I guess if you're starving, it wouldn't really matter. That's why I'm kind of, I'm a health food guy, and
Sure.
I try to get the healthiest I can. You're thinking, like you said, though, I have about a year's worth of food, I'd say, and I probably have about 100 gallons of water stored. But
Yes.
When the SHTF goes down, you're not going to the store. It's not like it's going to be like a blizzard where, you're home for a week. Like, this is going to be like forever.
Forever. Yeah. Yeah, so
I think it is. So
I'm a big fan of canned foods, and the canned foods I buy is mostly I try to get protein, because protein is going to be hard to come by. I mean, we can grow our emergency garden so we can get a lot of vegetable matter, but I'm not a vegetarian. I tend to lean towards the keto diet. I like lots of protein. You need protein, and especially fat and grease. I know from my experience leading, groups of teenagers into the wilderness for a week at a time for a canoe trip. When you're out in the wilderness, you know what you crave? You crave fat. You crave grease. You dream about grease. And so what I do is I buy a lot of canned food, and what I got is I got cans of meatballs in spaghetti sauce. So I've got lots of pasta, and if I make a pot of spaghetti, that will last me personally for 3 days. I can live off a pot of spaghetti, or it can feed a family of 5 for a day. So I get lots of cans of meatballs in spaghetti sauce. I get meatballs in brown gravy, because I can put that on the rice. If I cook up a pot of rice, 2 cups of rice in a big pot, that's a lot of rice. Again, I can eat off of that for 3 days, or it can feed a family of 5 for 1 day. But to improve the taste of the rice and the spaghetti, I want grease and gravy and protein. So I get cans of meatballs and gravy. The other thing I get is beef stew, because it's got beef, it's got gravy, it's got grease, and it's got some vegetables in it. And we're up for a break, and we'll hang on there, John, and we'll be right back. And we're back, John. So I'm going to have to wrap it up with you pretty quickly, because apparently we have a whole bunch of callers on the line. But I would go for canned foods, John. Like I said, meatballs, gravy. I get canned ham. I get canned tuna. I get canned chicken. I get canned Spam, click, oysters, and sardines. Whatever protein you can get, and when you buy it, try to get the kind that's packed in oil, because you need the oil. That'll come in handy. And I've researched this like crazy, and canned foods will be good for 10 years, maybe 20 years, maybe even 30 years. But they're good for 10 years. And if we're still around in 10 years, we'll be okay.
Well, yeah, I think canned food will actually last 30 years or more, because there's a couple of videos on YouTube of people that, as a dare, they ate canned food from the 60s. They opened it up. There was nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
And
yeah.
listen, worst case scenario, if the can looks like it's expanding, look, it's the smell test. It's really simple. You open it up. If you faint because of the smell, then throw it out. It's really simple. And even still, even if it's bad and it's gone rotten, and you're now eating grass and tree bark, and don't laugh, a lot of people ended up eating grass and tree bark. You can, so long as you cook it long enough, you will kill the bacteria that will give you botulism, and you can still eat it. You wouldn't want to, but you could if you're eating grass. So I would go for canned foods, John.
Stefan, how long do you think we have? Because this war seems to be like it's going to happen. So I don't know. How long do you think before the final SHTF event?
You know, that is the toughest question because the timeline is the question. I can tell you what's going to happen. I just can't tell you when it's going to happen. But the best thing is to be prepared as much as you can now. Then when it does happen, then look, you did your best. I got as much together as I could. I stockpiled, I trained, I got my equipment. You know, I'm not stupid. I'm smart and cunning. Then you're just going to have to wing it from there. But I don't know when, John. I really don't.
Well, Stefan, thank you very much for taking my call. You know, you're a great guy. You're the man. And I hope you get out of Canada soon. I know you were trying to do that in the fall. But
they wouldn't let me into the United States. They turned me away at the border. So I'm back in Canada, but I'm in a small Mennonite town, lots of farms nearby, and I'm part of a pretty tight community, which is the other thing we need to do is form communities. So I'm okay for now. I wish I was in the States, but I'm not. John, thank you very much for calling in. Much appreciated, and thanks for buying my books. Thank
you, sir.
I'm going to move on to the next caller, which is Melissa from MD. What's MD?
That's Maryland.
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 Yep. Melissa, are you there?
Yes, I believe so.
Hi, Melissa.
What about you?
How are you doing?
Okay. I wanted to talk to you about the U.S. Census. Is that something that you can discuss with me, or should I direct it to someone else?
I'll be honest with you. I'm not really up to speed on that. Maybe you'd want to talk to somebody more informed than me, but I could help you with any other question.
Okay, well, when I'm not disappointed, but I wasn't expecting you. So, okay, yeah, I can try to get this. I'll just tell you what my question is. I'll let you have a stab at it with the understanding that you're not prepared to answer it. What I'm trying to find out is how we got these bulging U.S. House districts. My understanding is that after the census is done, the census, I'm talking about the decennial census, the Census Bureau tells the states how many U.S. House offices they're allowed to have. And I wonder how we got from under 100,000 residents per U.S. House office to above 600,000 residents per U.S. House office, because the Federalist Papers suggest that the U.S. House districts are supposed to be well below 100,000. So I'm wondering when all of that changed and why the Census Bureau was allowed to do that, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, Melissa, I'm sorry. I can't even offer an educated opinion on that. It's out of my field of expertise. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, no, that's okay. Thank you. I'll try somebody else.
Okay, good luck with your question. Thanks for calling in, Melissa. And I guess we're going to go now to Tom in Florida. Tom, are you there?
Tom just dropped off. He probably hit the wrong button or he had to take another call. But we do have Charlie in Florida. He's still
Okay.
here.
Charlie in Florida, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing well, thank you. I really enjoyed the first part of your show. You're very, very interesting guest, and you're doing a great job. I really, you need your own show here on RBN, actually. You could come on.
Oh, I don't have the energy for it. It's a lot of work. I don't know how Mike does this every day. I really don't.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can only imagine. But I was going to, talking about survival foods, the other day I ran across something I hadn't expected. I was just kind of perusing the internet, and I saw a thing on what the best survival food is, and I thought, that's strange. I've never heard, wonder what the best survival food is. And I looked it up, and it was a video, and it was on pemmican. I think that's the way you pronounce it.
Pemmican.
I may not be correct.
Pemmican, I think.
Do you know what it is?
Yeah, I know what it is. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and it's a video on how to make the pemmican, or pemmican.
Pemmican, yeah.
And, and it's, according to them, it'll stay keep up to like 50 years and maybe longer.
Yeah.
And it's full of protein.
Yep.
And other things that are good for you. It's got loads of fat.
Yes.
And so it's basically you just slice meat up and dry it out.
Yes.
And add blueberries.
Yeah.
I think, and then you render it all in fat.
Yes.
You boil fat down, render it down to, where you get all it's clear, and then you just stir it all in.
Or lard.
And I guess you let it dry out, huh?
Or lard. Lard keeps a long
lard,
time.
yeah, I guess lard would work. I don't do the pork thing, but yeah. I would use the beef fat myself, but I don't eat pork. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. It's for anybody that's interested. They can. It's pretty easy to make, and it keeps a long time. I mean, this is what Lewis and Clark used to do their travels.
Yeah.
So I wanted to thank you for your show. You're doing a great job. I wish you had your own show. That's all I wanted to add in. So that's it.
Oh, thanks, Charlie.
Thank
I appreciate your kind words. And yeah, a very good point, Pemmican. I had the benefit, again, when I was younger, of spending a lot of time in it was called Black Creek Pioneer Village. And this is one of those recreational villages from the 1800s. The buildings, the lifestyle, the people wore the same costumes. And I had a great opportunity because my public school was very close by. We went there every month. I learned how to weave. I learned how to spin wool. I learned how to forge horseshoes at the blacksmith shop. I learned leather making, candle making, baking bread, baking cookies, and a lot of those skills that our great-great-grandparents knew are excellent skills. And pemmican is one of those foods that they routinely made in those days. We had those mountain men that went out west and, explored the country and blazed the trails, and that was a hard life. Oh, my God. But yes, those skills that they had are the same kind of skills we are going to need now. If you can survive in the 1880s, you'll be able to survive what's coming. And the other thing I would add to that is Bannock Bread, and that's something we took with us into the woods all the time. We would pre-mix it in a baggie. It's just flour, water, and salt. And then you would make a dough of it, and then you would roll that dough into a string, well, sort of like a sausage thickness, and you would wrap that around a stick, and then you hold that stick over the campfire, and that would bake your bread, and then you would just pull the pieces of bread off of your stick. And when you're hungry, and you're always hungry when you're in the woods, and the smell of fresh baked bread, it was marvelous. So there are a lot of techniques that our great-grandparents knew that we need to rediscover and know ourselves, and that'll get us through it. But anyways, thank you, Charlie. We've got...
I have one more question real quick.
Sure, Charlie.
What are the Mylar bags? How do you get them, and are they more expensive? And I don't know about those. I know plastic bags, but not... I don't know about Mylar bags.
Okay, so Mylar is a kind of a composite material. It's plastic and it's also aluminum. So they kind of bond aluminum to plastic. I bought from Amazon 110 Mylar bags for $20. So it's not that expensive. And the benefit to Mylar over plastic is that I also got the plastic zip tie freezer bags. I use that for other things. But the benefit of the Mylar is that it lasts longer, whereas the plastic bags will eventually allow oxygen into it, and oxygen will deteriorate your food. So the Mylar bags will help preserve your food for a longer time.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlie, for calling in. And we're now going to go to Pat in Fort Worth, Texas.
Hi. Yeah, I wish you had your own show, too.
Thanks, Pat. I heard you yesterday. You called in.
Yeah?
Yeah. I remember you. You are a
I don't
memorable woman.
I never do remember. I don't know who I told what, but I was just reading a little thing that comes with a water bill, and they were talking about composting, and I thought, oh, that's good. I didn't know anybody did that, and so I went on the YouTube to see how to make a composter in your own yard.
Yes.
There's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
And that's one thing people can do to keep from having garbage to get rid of, or flies, or and also it takes the place of the fertilizer they're saying we can't get.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk about the need and everything in America for magnesium, and the magnesium sulfate, what do they call it? It's my bad time of the day. I'm wide awake at 2 in the morning.
Oh dear.
But if you use that for fertilizer, it grows real fast, and it would put the magnesium back in your body. And the reason people don't, their bones are fragile. I meant to talk to Michael's wife about that. Is that we don't get enough magnesium in our food, or we don't take it. Oh, I took one today. I said, you can take it until you have diarrhea.
Yes.
I mean, and it makes sure it goes straight to your bones on an empty stomach, and with the calcium, it has to balance, like 2 calciums for 1 magnesium.
Right.
Makes your bones strong, so you don't have to worry about falling and breaking anything.
Right. Well, I know I take magnesium, calcium supplements. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and composting is always good, especially if you're growing your own garden. I live in an apartment. Now, I have close friends that live very close to me, and they have a backyard, and they grow everything there, medicinal herbs and grapes and vegetables, and they compost as well. So you don't have to go out and buy fertilizer if you compost. So if you do compost, certainly put it to good use by making a small garden. Now, I don't have a lot of room, but what room I do have on the balcony, I'm just preparing my garden for this growing season. Every little bit helps, because growing food is like growing money. It really is. Mm-hmm. So even if you can, put a few plants, there are windowsill gardens, there are window gardens, there are balcony gardens, and you can even grow stuff indoors in these small little greenhouses. I would do that. I really would. It can't hurt. Even if you do nothing but grow Brussels sprouts. At least you're getting.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
At least you're getting.
Your window.
Yes, that's right. You can grow it in your window, and that way you have a use for your compost. And so I would definitely recommend that. I think that's a good idea.
Well, I wanted to warn people, too, about cans that pop top, like Spam.
Yeah.
I'd freeze it first, because one time I went by one and some little tiny worms were crawling out. There was no visible...
Oh, yeah.
No visible... No.
Yeah. Well,
visible in that pop top. So you got to worry about pop tops. I wouldn't keep those. And somebody said yesterday, no, I've already forgot who it was, unless it was Ron McDonald, you'd be surprised. They said to take the label off your cans and write on them with a magic marker, something like that, and then spray it with polyurethane so it won't start rusting anywhere.
Right. Yeah, the rust will damage the cans. Listen, from what I've read, you can eat the worms. As a matter of fact, as we know, the powers that be are trying to get us all to eat insects. So a few worms won't hurt you.
Well, you're probably right about that. I mean, the more we talk, the more we learn, don't we?
Yeah. Well, in
Well,
wilderness,
that and a victory garden.
in wilderness
They had
survival.
that
Yep.
war.
Yeah, in wilderness survival, they recommend you eat grubs and worms. You can do that. It's not something I want to do, but it won't kill you.
No, no. It depends on where you live. That's probably a luxury in some parts of the world, and I'd rather have that than.
Well, I lived in China, and the Chinese eat everything. Everything. There's nothing that crawls or flies or walks on four legs that the Chinese won't eat. So, but they're used to a lot of periods.
Eat it before it eats your food, right?
Yeah, eat the worms before it eats your food.
Okay, well, I do think we need this kind of a program, because, I like to talk about what's wrong with the country, but first, you never know what could cause you to have to, or us,
Yep.
to have to be that bad off.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, that's why.
Anybody that.
Yes, that's why my
Winter, like,
advice to people is, stock up on the food, get prepped, get ready, so that you can, provide for yourself and your family everything that society used to provide, which is food, medicine, water, security, communications. Those things we have to do for ourselves. Listen, I'm gonna let you go, Pat, because I got one more caller, and then we're just about out of time. Thank you for calling, sweetie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. And I think what will be our last caller is going to be James from Ohio, I believe. James, you there?
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Yes, I am. Thank you. I'm enjoying your show tremendously.
Oh, thank you.
I will be looking up your book. Yeah. So I have a question about water. What's your advice for the best way to start storing water for city dwellers without spending a lot of money?
Yeah, good question. So you need at least, what I recommend for people to do is get like a week's worth of water stored. And then you need to make a plan. A lot of what I talk about and what I do in my consultations is you need to plan for things. So we've got plan A, plan B, plan C. If this doesn't work, then what can we do? And if that doesn't work, then what can we do? So for me, it's crucial to get a week's worth supply of water for everyone in your family. So you have to multiply 6 liters per day per family member. Now what I do, I have cats, so I buy cat litter all the time, and they come in these big vinyl jugs. So after I've used up the cat litter, I use the jug to store water. I rinse it out, clean it out, and then I add a couple of drops of chlorine bleach, and then I rinse it again, and then I fill it up with water, and I store those because they're pretty compact. So I'll store, them underneath the sink in the kitchen and underneath the sink in the bathroom. And so long as I have like a week's supply, and the reason I say a week's supply, because you need a lot of water, and if you're going to store enough, you can't possibly store enough water for a month. Right? It's impossible. Unless you live in a big house and you got a garage and all that.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Then you can, maybe buy one of those 500-gallon water containers and stick that in the garage or under the porch or something like that. But for most people living in a residential neighborhood or an apartment, you cannot store a month's supply of water. So, but I want you to store a week's supply, because when SHTF occurs, you do not want to be running around trying to haul water out of the local creek. You're going to have a lot of things, a lot of problems to deal with right away, with food and security and the panic and terror that sets in after everything goes dark. So I'd rather you have a week's breathing room on the water issue. So get a week's worth supply. You can also get those they use them in camping. They're foldable, vinyl, plastic water carriers. They're square. They have like a faucet or like a spigot on one end, so you can put it on the edge of a table and use the spigot to get water out of it. They typically are about 5 gallons, right? And they're pretty cheap, so buy a couple of those if you don't have cats and don't have a bunch of vinyl containers lying around. So grab a couple of those 5-gallon containers and fill them up and put them underneath the sink. Now, this will only last you so long. Again, you cannot store enough water unless you live on a ranch and you've got a lot of money and time to stockpile the water. So plan B then is you need to get water from nature. Now, I live in the northeastern part of Canada. You can't walk a mile without tripping across a creek or a river or a lake. So there's all kinds of fresh water around here. Trouble is, a lot of that water is unfit to drink. So you need to figure out, first of all, where are you going to get your water from? And it's really heavy, to log this stuff, to haul this water around. Assuming you even have a car that you can put it into, or you can put it in the back of the pickup truck, it's still going to be a huge pain in the butt to haul this water. But then you also need to figure out a way to purify it. There are numerous different ways to do that. There's the Berkey water filter. You can improvise your own water filter. Boiling water is always a good way. It will kill the pathogens in the water. So long as you bring it to a boil, you will kill the pathogens that will cause illness. And you can also use chlorine or those water purification tablets. You can even use iodine, 4 drops of iodine in a gallon of water. And again, that will kill the pathogens. But the final solution that I've come up with, and I just bought it last month, and that is a distiller. I bought a 5-gallon distiller. So I could take water from a sewer, distill it, and it will come out pure. And what a distiller does is it kills the pathogens. It takes out the pathogens. But the good part is it also takes out the toxic metals. It takes out the fluoride that we're being poisoned with. And it takes
Stefan,
out... Yes.
We're right up against the end of the show here, so I wanted to give you a chance to tell people where they can find you. I found ChinaStrategies.com that seemed to be pretty good. Had your YouTube posted there. So that's the website for everybody. And it's been a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, Mike.
Everybody and the callers. I'm glad that the listeners to Mike Rivero were familiar with you. And
thanks, James.
Great show.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. Much appreciated. And take care of yourself. And remember, get ready. Get ready.